So I got the first kind of like idea that there was scoliosis in Australia. We were at a festival called Woodford Folk Festival, and me and Mum were teaching parent-child acro, and I think she just realised that I wasn't symmetrical, and luckily there was a chiropractor there who kind of knew more about it than we would, and she kind of like took me to one side and tried to figure out what was going on, and eventually thought it's probably scoliosis. So then when we went home, I went to the doctors, and to be honest, I think because I was quite young, I don't really remember. I was probably about like 9 or 10 when that first thing happened. And then, yeah, I think I just went and got lots of tests done. And then lots of x-rays to measure the degree, a little bit of monitoring to see if it was getting worse, because if it's not moving, then they don't have to do anything. They can just kind of like let you get on with your life. Mm-hmm. And then I think that was when they realised that it was slowly moving as I was growing, and I was growing really quickly. So that was when they passed me on to Sheffield, where they do the spine core. So I think that was the moment of decision of, okay. So I had a panel at the front of my, like, kind of between my hip bones, and then 2 panels that sat on my pelvis, and they had lots of poppers on, and they were attached by 2 straps that went around either thigh, and then 2 slightly smaller straps that went like under my legs and then to the front. And then I'd put on the bolero, which is the panel at the back of your like shoulder blades, and then you'd have to follow along in like a certain order, and I'd have to like put my upper body into a certain position to put it on in the first place. And it was just, yeah, it became routine. I remember I listened to Abba in the MRI scanner, and then you're lying in this like tube for God knows how long, and it's just playing Abba, and you're not allowed to move. Your mum sat at your feet, and it was just a bit ridiculous if I think back. So in Sheffield, they would take me into the first little room where they'd measure my height and then they'd measure the length of my spine. So they'd have me like sat on a little chair which had a little height measure on it as well. So they measure the length from like the bottom of my seat until the top of my head. And then they'd get me to take off my top and face a wall. And then they take a photo which had like lines on it projected on top to get like the topological idea of what my spine was doing. And then that was all that happened in that room. I remember the
What did you call that? Nice. Did you call that photo anything?
Yes, we'd call the little stripy photo a zebra scan because it made me feel like a zebra as a 10-year-old, which was quite nice. And then we would go into the second room, which is where they would like make any alterations to the brace. So they would use a little spirit level that had a little groove in it for my spine, and they'd move that up and down my back, basically trying to figure out how much of a deviation was between the left-hand side of me and the right-hand side of me. It was always the same. It was like, go to get a zebra scan, go and get the brace fitted, go and get an x-ray, talk to a consultant, go home. It was always the same. Hurt where the pressure was on my left side, which is why they gave me the Pringle, but to be honest that didn't really help very much. It helped a little bit, but it wasn't super helpful. I used to like dig my fingers into it and pull it away from me, and that was the only way that it would like feel a little bit better. And then where it went under my legs, that hurt, but I think that was from friction more than pressure, because obviously you're walking, so it was like rubbing on like the inside of your thighs, which was quite painful. Like if anyone saw it, there would always be the same set of questions. Someone would be like, oh, what's that? And then I'd explain that it was a brace, then they'd ask what it's for, and then I'd say it's for scoliosis, then they'd want to know what scoliosis was, and then I'd have to explain that, and then they'd ask if it hurt, and it was just really the same every time. And I think I got a bit fed up of the same questions, so I just stopped wearing it. But I remember at school particularly, that was the time where people didn't really understand. They saw it as kind of like a limiting factor. So there would always be that sense of pity that someone's like, oh no, poor you, like you have to wear this thing, but like it was always fine. Like it's just what I had to do. It wasn't something that I needed pity for or anything like that. If anything, I felt worse when people did pity it and didn't treat it as the normal, because like I couldn't get away from it, so it was always annoying to have people be like, oh, do you ever wish it was gone? It's like, well yes, it would be much more convenient to not have a wonky back, and that's normal for me. But yeah, it'd be much more convenient to have a straight spine, but I can't have one, so there's no point in wishing.
With a bullet full of love makes
So, because it hurt, quite often I would be in school wearing it. This is before I had my whole like rebellion at 15 and never wore it again. I would like sit in a class and I'd be like, oh, this is so painful. I couldn't focus because it was like stinging, hot. It used to like burn. It was like a pressure sore, so it would just like burn red hot, and would just, all my attention would be on like my side or my legs or whatever was hurting. And I remember at that point, like, if it wasn't enough to just like dig my thumb in and pull it away, then I would have to like undo it from the bottom, which obviously looks really awkward in a class when you're like trying to undo like 4 things that are attached around your like thighs. You've got to like undo this like strip of Velcro that's about 10 centimeters long on either leg and a popper on each side as well. So I remember just like really quietly, as soon as like people were talking, like trying to undo bits of it. And then I'd always be sat next to a mate because we used to hop seats all the time. So I had never had to worry about someone sat next to me who I didn't know or like didn't know what was going on. So I remember it was always a bit of a giggle, like trying to get the brace off during a lesson, because the teacher would probably be like, what's that noise, what's going on? So at like 14, 15, the sort of age that I started going to school without it on, so year 10 and year 11, I remember I used to hide it in the bottom of my wardrobe every morning. And I think if Mum ever asked, I probably did say I had it on, but she would have always known I could never get away with anything in front of my mum. But I had a little drawer that I remember very well that had random stuff in it, and I'd like tuck it underneath all of the random stuff.
What sort of random stuff?
Oh, it's just like, you know when you're a kid and you collect lots of things and then you haven't quite gone through your life's belongings yet. So I remember it was just all of the random like boxes of like those weird necklaces that everyone used to make with beads and stuff. All of that like random stuff that was just in the bottom drawer of my wardrobe. And then I'd like tuck the brace underneath all of that. And then I'd get home and put it back on and pretend I'd been wearing it all day, even though we both knew I hadn't been. So there was only one, and on a wash day, that would be the 4 hours that I wasn't having it on, it would go in the washing machine, it would have a wash, it would go on the radiator, it would go back on.
When you put it in your cupboard, did it hang up on a hanger?
No, it was crumpled at the bottom of the drawer. It didn't deserve a hanger. After I was like discharged from the hospital, they said I didn't have to wear the brace anymore. Not that I'd been wearing it much anyway. I was 15 and didn't want to wear it, so maybe 16. I was like towards the end of my teens and just could not be bothered with the brace. So I'd already stopped wearing it, and then they said that I didn't have to wear it. And I wanted to set it on fire, because I felt like that was a cathartic thing to do. It's like what you do with your school notes at the end of the school year. Like I wanted to set it on fire. And my mum thought that that would not be a good thing to do because it's an interesting, like, scientific object. So Mum had the idea of donating the brace to a science museum because she doubted that anyone else in my position, like, would have thought of that, and also they all probably wanted to set it on fire as well.